Manhwa title in the right corner of the screen. Enjoy watching. Princess Alina, who had a very tragic fate, died, and then she found herself back in her 3-year-old body and came up with a plan. She decided that from now on to her not-needed-none family. And so Alina's path to independence began. Despite her age, she began to make progress and opened a pastry shop. She predicted the success of the mine with expensive materials, and also opened various businesses, having her first-class sources. Alina worked tirelessly all the time to earn more. And suddenly the day came when everyone turned their attention to her as the great princess. And those around her suddenly changed their minds, and many loyal people appeared. Even her father, who had always ignored her, began to act differently. And when she first called him dad, he decided to make that day a national holiday. Alina didn't understand what was going on here at all. But all this is just the story of the main character. And on in itself, business. There is more one character. One day, when she was kidnapped, the knights hid her in a terrible place, and her father found her. They, however, were too late, despite the fact that they have enormous power. The tearful reunion was over, and it was time to pull out another person. But for some reason, no one paid attention to the other box sitting nearby. Alina and her father simply returned to the palace immediately, and the box with another child remained closed. No one saved this girl with pink hair. She realized that it had always been like this. The connection with the main character never brought anything good. This girl, already tired, be secondary character. One day she realized that she was in a novel, and her role was just a noble supporting character. She was the super rich young lady Raveler, and at first everything was going well for her. She was even happy with who she was. This too turned out to be an illusion that shattered into pieces in an instant. Felicity is the family that gave all myself for the sake of this country's. So when Raveler was only 5 years old, she had to study hard and maintain a desire for knowledge. Her father's devotion to the imperial family knew no bounds. He served them with all his heart and instilled this love in his children. And that was why she couldn't understand why a family so loyal to the ruling dynasty was never mentioned in this novel. All because of the obsession with water via the tyrant emperor Liam Curtis Restal. In fact, he was very strange. He could just create a national holiday for nothing or give his daughter an entire page. One day, his assistant said that if the emperor wanted to give a gift to his daughter, it would be better to choose another option, because a gift washed in blood and the inhabitants of the empire are unworthy of the princess. This assistant, a supporting character, is thrust into the spotlight because he dared to speak his mind. And he is a nobody, other than Duke Felicity, Father Raver. Then the emperor became angry and said that the duke had neglected the princess anyway, and he had always neglected the princess. The emperor therefore decided to accuse the duke of conspiring with the enemy and sentence the entire family to death for treason. Raveler looked in horror at the servants who were killed on the spot. Fate befell all. Raveler lost her entire family and loved ones at the age of 7. Mom, Dad, and everyone who was connected to Felicity's family in any way are all dead now. But Raveler tried to run away. The Imperial Knights were chasing her, and Raveler was almost resigned to her fate. Father should have been more concerned about his family after all. Of course, a hero should stand up to a tyrant, but why did he do it? The knights captured Ravenler. Now she couldn't escape, but she began to make another plan, because she didn't want to follow in her father's footsteps. However, the fate that befell her was not at all what she wanted. Raveler was given the opportunity to serve the princess. However, this position was very dangerous. She became her personal taster, and of course, there was no right to refuse. Ending. You could say she followed the same path as her father. A little earlier, after she was captured by the knights, they did not kill her, but sent her to prison. She was considered a criminal because she was the daughter of Duke Felicity, and because she looked like him, many hated her even more. She was told that her fate would be decided by the princess of the empire. If luck was on her side, Raveler would be sent to the springs in the mine. However, most likely she will simply be sent to the mountain of magical beasts. Raveler was shocked to learn this because the little girl had no chance of surviving there, but this was her punishment for insulting the princess, and it was all her father's fault. Even adults did not try to help Ravenler, but only laughed at her. Raveler seemed to be the only sane person here and understood that everyone had gone crazy. They would not want to force a small, fragile girl to swing a pickaxe in the mines, and if not, send her to the mountain of magical beasts, from where even imperial knights did not return alive. This country actually allowed this kind of child abuse, and Raveler was panicked, but still tried to find some way out. She remembered that the fall of Felicity's house would not be detailed in the original story, because why tell the story of such a minor character in such detail? But this also means that as long as Raveler stays as far away from the princess as possible, she has a chance to change her peaceful life. Then she had hope. No matter whether she ended up in the mines or somewhere else, she was ready to deal with it and create her own happy ending outside of the original story. At least that's what she thought. But suddenly she was released from prison and told that from now on she would be the princess's personal taster. Raveler was disappointed and didn't understand why things had come to this. A food taster tries food before it is eaten by a member of the imperial family. This job title intended for prevention murders. Many people think that tasting only gourmet food is a privilege, but in reality, it is a very dangerous job where a person risks his own life every time to test food for poison. Raveler had to eat each dish one bite at a time, fearing for her life each time. She was very unhappy that out of all the options, she was the one chosen to be the taster. When she was already finishing her food, the princess suddenly came. The maids, who had just been looking at Raven with hatred, immediately changed their attitude towards the princess and showered her with attention and love. The princess was already used to this, but then she saw some girl, unfamiliar. Then the maids told her that this was the girl the princess had saved from execution. Alina became curious and decided to approach, but Raveler simply prayed that everyone would forget about her. The princess finally came up and finally remembered that this was the girl who was locked in the dungeon. She immediately liked this cutie and asked how the food tasted. Alina seemed very kind, and in addition to this work, she wanted to make friends with the girl and spend time together. Raveler didn't want this at all. She was finally able to return to her room. Ravenler would never like such food. And even the stale bread, like a stone that they gave her in prison, was 1,000 times more delicious than all these dishes. If only the princess hadn't said that imprisoning children was so cruel, then Raveler would have had a different fate. But in the end, her life changed just because of that one phrase. The current timeline corresponds to the end of the first part of the novel, before the words 10 years later appear. There will be a long time gap before the main character Alina grows up. Although Raveler has a rough recollection of the original story, she knows little about this period, but she can say for sure, if she does not do something, she will die very soon. I wish I could escape right now, but survival in the Imperial Palace is of utmost importance to deal with this. She needs to find a way to resist the poisons and not die. As she spat out the window, she saw a field of flowers, and that was the key moment. In the second part of the novel, when the princess was on the verge of death due to an unknown poison, a magical plant brought her back to consciousness. This is the rapier flower. Raveler had to get this plant. Although it is a very rare flower, there are many exotic plants in the palace, so knowing only the name, Raveler decided to find out what this plant looks like as soon as possible and find it. With confidence and enthusiasm, she left her room and went to the library. She wanted to take a botanical encyclopedia, but it turned out that traders have no right to touch the Empire's property, so she was given nothing. Raveler really needed it and begged the librarian hard, but she was still not allowed. She said that she could do her job as a taster better, but this was taken as a threat that she might slip a poisonous plant to the princess. There was another person in the library. He was reading a book, but that annoying voice was bothering him. So he just threw the book in the face of this librarian, who was talking some nonsense and had already moved on to humiliating Raveler's father. The girl was very surprised when a book suddenly flew into the guy's face and he fell to the floor. When she turned around, she saw the man who did it. He looked very good and told this librarian that if he wanted to poop so badly in his nasty voice, he should go outside. Raveler was scared because she immediately recognized that this was Duke Cassius Vicelliberi. He is the sworn enemy of Felicity's family. He was with the imperial family and was not afraid of demons. The one who sought great glory for himself with her. In the original story, he was also the main puppeteer who controlled everything from the shadows. In general, he is a really scary person. Raveler had heard rumors that he wouldn't even spare children if he didn't like them. So she began to tremble with fear and didn't know what to do now, but she had to leave as soon as possible. The Duke turned his attention to her and began to reach out his hand towards her. Raveler truly believed that she was about to die, and her heart almost stopped from fear. She didn't want her life to end like this, but he didn't hit her. He just picked her up to take a closer look and realized that she was okay, and even shook it a little to make sure. Ravenler didn't understand what was happening. That librarian was very upset that the Duke would treat someone like that. Even with his title, you can't treat people like that. It only took one terrifying look from the Duke for the librarian to get scared and run away. Raveler wasn't very happy with the situation, because now she definitely wouldn't be able to get the botanical encyclopedia, and most likely they wouldn't give her the book even if she was dying. Then she thought that there was no other choice but to steal the book. The Duke had already put her down on the floor, and suddenly she had an idea. If he was so kind to me for some reason, she decided to ask him to lend her one book. She plucked up her courage and asked him about it, but he answered without even thinking, "No problem," and asked what book she wanted. Raveler said she wanted a botanical encyclopedia because she was now the princess's taster, so she needed to learn as much as she could about medicinal plants. The Duke said that his knight would bring her this book. Raveler was very grateful. He was so kind, and partly she even began to jump, holding his hands. And she said that the room is in the princess's palace. The book must be delivered there. Raveler promised that she would definitely repay for the help, after which she left the library. But even before leaving, she bowed to him out of respect. The Duke, seeing her pink hair, was immediately plunged into memories. Now he turned to Hannon, who had been standing behind the closet all this time, waiting to be called. The Duke asked how the investigation into the matter was progressing. Hannon found out that there was indeed a traitor among Felicity's family. The princess boarded a ship bound for Pastorimo, which is probably why she was unable to contact the knights. This means that getting her back won't be that easy, but that would have been the case if the Duke had ignored the Emperor's second order. About 2 months ago, while he was advancing with the army and increasingly occupying Pastorimo, an important strategic point for the Allied forces, he received a letter from Duke Felicity. He asked Cassius to take care of his daughter and be her support. However, it was too late. The Duke died, leaving behind a piece of paper that was dearer to him than life. Cassius told Hannon to bring the botanical encyclopedia to the girl. He will treat her a little kinder, since she is as weak-willed as her mother, Yura. The next day, the princess spent her time happily writing, and Raveler suffered. She needed to try all the food during this time, and what she hated most was that the main characters in such stories always loved sweets. Yesterday, the Duke kindly gave her a botanical book. However, because Raveler works as a taster, and because of this constant flow of desserts, she has no time to read at all. So she has to eat all these sweets, even if she doesn't like them, and her stomach already hurts. And the princess continued to ride her horse when she met Raven's gaze. The princess winked at her, and everyone took notice, were delighted, but Raveler just sincerely hoped that these riding lessons would end soon. Raveler noticed that when he was around the princess and the knight, he bragged that there was no one in the palace who could ride a horse better than him, so he taught her. But despite how he looked now, Raveler hated him. After all, when Felicity's family was attacked, he would have been at the forefront. He was the princess's pet dog, and his name was Cain Ashley. He was the worst of the worst people, and Raveler just hoped that the heavens would punish him. Thinking about this, she stabbed another dessert with her fork, but suddenly heard some kind of commotion. Ashley somehow fell off his horse. The wound was serious, but there were enough people to help him immediately. Even the princess was worried about him, so he was ready to even die. Raveler heard this, and her mood immediately improved. Now she ate it with pleasure, unlike other desserts. As evening approached, Ravenler finally had a lot of free time, all thanks to that idiot who fell off his horse. She took the encyclopedia, went out into the fresh air, sat under a tree, and finally began to read. Finally, after some time, she found a plant called Rapier. There was a clear description of it. This plant has 6 petals that give off a sweet scent and is found near Manishi trees and is most often found growing in the shade. Manisha trees are usually too pest-infested, so they are rarely kept in the gardens, which means they're probably in the forest of the dead. Raveler didn't understand why there was such a terrifying place near the main character's house, but at least it wasn't a problem now. Raveler said happily, "I was going to go and find that plant right now." She was going to give it her all because she didn't want to lose and she wanted to be happy. And while she was shouting all this, she then noticed that some boy was attacking her. He had been sitting there all this time, but she only noticed him now, and more importantly, who was this child anyway? He had the characteristic red eyes of the imperial family, as well as a perfect appearance that even the main characters would envy. The boy looked scary and wore archaic, old-fashioned clothes. However, this character never appeared in the original story. Raveler is sure that the princess is the only child of the imperial family, but then who is this boy? She decided to go up to him and meet him right then and there. But when she asked his name, he didn't answer and just continued to stare. Raveler didn't understand why he was so silent, and then suddenly noticed that she had stepped on a small grave with a bouquet of flowers next to it. The girl immediately started apologizing, and she really did it by accident, so she said she would bring new flowers. There was a flower meadow nearby, so she quickly picked a new bouquet and then asked, "Whose grave is this?" She sat down next to him, waiting for an answer, and finally he spoke. He said that nothing would change even if she found out, but Raveler still wanted to apologize properly, so she asked. The boy, with a cold gaze, said that this was his parents' grave. Raveler was very surprised. She also didn't understand why he didn't show any emotions. Maybe he didn't get along with his parents? Raveler suddenly remembered how, when she was captured by the knights, she was angry at her father because he was the one who became the hero who stood up to the tyrant. And now she didn't even ask any unnecessary questions. It was as if she was looking at her own reflection. So approaching the grave, she prayed and apologized for disturbing the peace. And then she went up to the boy, took his hand and held it very tightly. His face immediately changed. He didn't understand what she was doing and why. Raveler seemed to be trying to tame the kitten, and said that she would now share her power with him, and said that from now on only good things would happen to him. This week would pass in peace, and the next week will be filled with smiles. He will be happy so that even the saddest memories will evaporate. Raveler was sure of it because she was usually not mistaken about such things, and then he pulled his hand away, asking if she was happy. Raveler couldn't answer this question because she is in a difficult situation now, but she is sure that she will definitely be happy. Then she went to the tree near which she was sitting, took the encyclopedia from there, and went up to the boy again, and she asked him about the rapier flower and gave him a huge description so that he would understand exactly what she was talking about. He didn't say anything, so Raveler asked him to let her know if he suddenly saw the flower. He didn't even agree, but she thanked him in advance and left. The guy started going over everything she said in his head, and his expression softened because she said she usually didn't make mistakes. A few days later, in the imperial palace, in the garden, the princess presented her father with a very generous gift. It was a cake in gratitude to her father for everything. Today is Thanksgiving Day, so the princess tried to bake a cake for her beloved dad. And of course, no one was thrilled with this terrible creation. But it was nice that she showed such attention and made a cake especially for Dad, despite the fact that it didn't turn out very beautiful. Dad was still very happy. It was the best cake he had ever seen, so he really wanted to try it. Raveler was also sitting in the garden at a separate table, waiting for something to be given to her for tasting. She was thinking about her own things. She didn't know what to do because no matter how much she looked, she couldn't find that flower. She wanted to ask that boy if he had seen the flower, but when she came to the grave several times, there was no one there. She thought that perhaps she had been too rough with him. Well, anyway, the most important thing is that she didn't find the flower. Maybe it doesn't grow in the forest of the dead at all, and that's the worst thing that can happen. Due to searching for that damn flower, Raveler hadn't slept properly for several nights, so she was feeling very ill physically. She noticed the maids discussing how the emperor's mood had already improved thanks to the princess, and that it had worsened because of the visit of the Duke of Viceleberry. Raveler immediately began to listen when she heard about Herzen. It turned out that not long ago, during a meeting, a conflict occurred. Raveler was even glad, because it meant that what she had given him in the evening had been useful. When the assistant had decided to give him the encyclopedia, Raveler had also given him something, and if the Duke was still in the palace, it was because of this. In any case, this is good news. Even though she has no intention of taking revenge, it does not mean that she has completely forgiven the imperial family. She looked with hatred at the emperor, who was enjoying spending time with his daughter, but he himself left someone else's daughter without parents. Raveler was just thinking that she wouldn't let this emperor die an easy death when she suddenly felt very ill. She started coughing up blood after eating dessert. She didn't understand why this was happening all of a sudden, and everything started to blur before my eyes. All the servants immediately rushed to inform the emperor and princess about this so that they would not eat anything. Reaver, no one even came to help. She fell to the ground and coughed up blood without stopping, and she was very sorry that she had not found that flower. After all, if she had found it, this would not have happened. That boy was near his father, yes, and heard some sudden commotion. He held in his hands a whole mountain of those flowers that Raveler had been trying so hard to find. The girl was in so much pain that she could not breathe. She was coughing and choking, but she still did not lose consciousness. She didn't want to die. And then someone came up to her and picked her up in his arms, saying her name. It was a duke, but she didn't differentiate people much back then. For some reason, she felt warmth from this man and called him Dad. Once, when she was even younger, her dad told her that she should never bottle up negative emotions and just let them go, forgetting about them. Ray should not hold on to resentment or regret. And if something so terrible happens that she can't just let it go, then she should just smile. If she does that, she'll definitely feel a little better. At the time, Raveler didn't understand why he told her something so complicated, but she should have guessed his true intentions. When that day came and her parents had already died, there were a few people left who had managed to take Raveler. Her father's last will was for his daughter to survive. He wanted nothing more than for Raveler to forget everything and find happiness. That was his last will. Raveler realized she was wrong and wanted her parents to come back to life. But now it was impossible. If only she had been more attentive, and if only the knowledge of the novel had returned to her earlier, then she could have escaped with everyone else. Raveler isn't sure she can forget everything she's already experienced and not hold a grudge. These memories haunted Ravenler's dreams all night after she fainted, and even in her sleep she cried. That boy was next to her, and he seemed to know what to do. He took care of Ravenler just this once, and then after 1 week she started to recover. She really thought she was going to die, but she never thought that the Duke would save her again. On top of that, he even gave Ray a separate room. She is truly grateful, but there is actually a reason why he helped her then, that day. Lord Cassius came to see her in person. He wanted to know where she got this information from, which she passed on through an assistant, so he helped. The information she conveyed was a secret correspondence between the late Emperor and the previous Duke of Vice-Laborie. More precisely, she conveyed information that this correspondence was hidden among the belongings of the previous ruler. Hanan's assistant was sitting next to her, trying to find out what else was known. After all, thanks to her, they were able to reclaim the lands that were originally seized by the Emperor. Now they want to ask her more about it. However, she was barely surviving anyway, so she said that she only knew this information because her father had told her about it in the past. There was nothing else she could do to help. But even this contribution was greatly appreciated. This incident made Raveler realize once again that her life could depend on something as insignificant as a single plant. And in such a situation, she could never cooperate with the puppeteer, even if he saved her. Raveler had too many thoughts about this. She felt guilty for leaving him out of fear and didn't want to help even though he saved her life. She would figure out later whether she needed to pay the Duke somehow or not. Right now, there was something more important to focus on, and that was survival. And next to the bed, when she had already woken up, there was a bouquet of flowers. The sweet scent of 6 purple petals. Without a doubt, it was Rapier. Raveler was sure that this boy brought flowers for her, but she didn't even know where he found them. Behind the fog, but she remembered how at night he forced her to eat these petals so that she would get better and become happy. Raveler felt a great debt of gratitude and wanted to see him to thank him in person. She wrote a small note and then folded it beautifully and was going to go to that grave to leave the note there. But as soon as she got out of bed, the doors of her room opened. Suddenly, very unexpectedly, the princess herself came to her and even brought something with her. She looked very cute and happy, and was interested in Raveler's well-being. Raveler didn't expect the princess to come to check on her, so she froze in place. I don't even know what to say. Raveler's temperature. She acted like it was normal and they were just friends. But Raveler was surprised even that the princess knew her name. Alina suddenly started crying and apologizing to Raven. She would never force her to do something like that, and she actually didn't know anything about this job. Raveler felt uncomfortable. She of course said that everything was fine because it was her job, but she felt uncomfortable because of the princess's behavior. Alina acted as if she knew Raveler very well, although up to this point they had only greeted each other once. Now the princess suggested that Raveler become a maid of honor instead of a taster, a very high rank. Raveler was shocked because she was still a taster, but the princess insisted on stopping this dangerous business and just being there as a lady-in-waiting. Raveler was very doubtful that she would be able to stand up in front of the tall princesses, whose father could execute at the slightest provocation. But the princess said that she would ask her father about it, and everything would be fine. Raveler was sure that many heads had been cut while people were serving the princess, so she was very afraid to agree to this. But the princess did not demand an answer right now. In fact, it was only later that Raveler realized what incredible communication skills Alina had. It was very easy to talk to her, even though it wasn't the first time they had talked like that today. Suddenly, they were interrupted. and the princess was informed that the knights who had gone to exterminate the magical beasts had finally returned. Raveler, although she kept a calm face, was actually very happy. The princess really wanted to meet Carlson, so she left, but she was going to meet Raveler again later. And when she was about to leave the room, she noticed very beautiful flowers in a vase downstairs. Raveler started to get very worried because the princess was showing so much attention. Alina came closer and said that she really liked these flowers, and in general, she liked purple flowers. The first flowers her father gave her were purple peonies. And now, remembering this, the princess wanted to take these flowers for herself. Raveler thought at first that everything was too good, but now she was terrified because she could not refuse the princess. Things go wrong, and after a few days, Raveler is left without flowers, or rather, only one flower is left because the princess took everything. The main character of this touching novel really does have a good life. She smiled and got everything she wanted. Over the next few days, the princess came and asked Raveler for flowers, each time taking more and more. And it even got to the point that she came early in the morning, while Raveler was still sleeping, and left only a note like, not to wake her up and take the flowers. At this rate, she would take the last flower, so Raveler wanted to find more rapiers as soon as possible. There was a problem, though. She left a note for that boy, but she wasn't sure if he'd read it. Maybe he was just sitting there waiting, so she went to check on the spot if the note had been read. It was only when she was about to leave that she learned of the chaos that was going on at the only exit. There were a lot of wounded knights lying there, receiving first aid because of the protracted battle. No one would heal a commoner with magic, and once the next victim arrived, this guy was already forgotten. He remained unnoticed, so Raveler was able to quietly approach him and take a closer look. His whole body was already covered with horrible flowers. I will soon reach his heart, because it was bitten by a magical beast. Raveler would help give this guy the rapier she had left to save him, but honestly, she didn't want to do that, since she might not be able to find that flower anymore. And anyway, this is too personal to share. Raveler had been carrying the flower with her on purpose so that the princess wouldn't take at least the last one, but now she decided to help this guy anyway. The rapier does not wither immediately after being picked, but once this happens, it completely loses its properties, and this flower will wither in 2 days, so let it be useful for at least someone. Raveler tried to bring this guy to his senses and said that if he ate this flower, the poison should stop. He opened his mouth and swallowed it. Raveler decided to help, even if it didn't work. The princess would have collected the remaining flowers anyway. Well, it was better to use the last flower to help someone. She gave this flower as if she was sharing her own life, so she hoped that this guy would also repay her in kind someday. She did everything she could and prayed for him to survive, and then finally walked away with this guy watching her go. Raveler walked through the forest for 6 hours looking for a flower, but found nothing. And now she feels sick and nauseous. At home, having turned into her room, she crawled to her bed. She realized that it was not worth straining herself so much yet, but it was worth it. Raveler didn't get to see the boy, but there was no note, so he read it. And today I managed to save a flower from the princess. She came to take the last one, but Raveler said that insects ate it. Raveler was about to rest and sleep to save her strength for tomorrow, but suddenly the doors from the balcony swung open loudly. In the middle of the night, it was very scary, but Raveler was even happy when she saw that boy. She never thought she would see him so quickly. Only for some reason, he didn't look very happy. Quickly approached her and asked what secret she knew. Raveler. I'm so glad he read her letter and finally came. She wrote there that she knew his secret, but didn't say what it was. Now she thanked him for his help and asked how he had lived all this time, because she really wanted to meet him. The boy realized that she had simply deceived him so that he would come, and that she did not know any secret. Raveler was very apologetic about it. She just thought that if she wrote something ordinary, he wouldn't even read it. Now he wanted to leave, but she hugged him, trying to hold him back. Raveler said that if he listened to her and did what she asked, she would let him go right away. But he could certainly get out anyway. He just hadn't made the effort to get her off him yet. But the life he saved had to be treated with more care, so he didn't want any pests. Raveler was very grateful to him for saving her and wanted to thank him personally and ask him about something, where he got those flowers. He said he would tell her if she let him go, but Raveler was doubtful and thought he would rush off as soon as she let him go. And even though he said he wouldn't run away, she still didn't believe him and offered to at least hold hands for safety. She was so annoying that it was easier to just agree to it, and so they went together and he found flowers. Raveler was very tired while she walked after him. She was very short of breath. But then they came to that very place and there were a lot of flowers growing there. It was just paradise. Rapiers, a whole huge meadow. Raveler was very grateful and immediately hugged the boy. He became a real angel to her. He saved, both with good intentions and a life that everyone ignored. So Ravenler decided to become an angel for him too and protect him. Then she moved closer to him and said quietly, "The next time you need help, I will come and help. And when the time comes, I hope your highness will tell you your name." The boy was very surprised. She did know his secret after all, and he was surprised how she knew about it. But just like he helped Raveler knowing she was from Felicity's family, she will help him too knowing something. She was going to share everything she knew with him when it was needed. The next day, Raveler was back at work, well rested. She was still a taster and had gotten used to it, but today she noticed that it was a bit noisy. The maids carried many gifts for the village and its inhabitants and other people. The reward for the villagers who had recently hunted magical beasts had arrived. Raveler immediately remembered the boy she had given her last flower to save him and hoped he was okay. She didn't regret giving him the flower, it was the right decision. Besides, she found a lot more. And now, just in case, she eats one flower in the morning and takes a few with her in reserve, so that now she doesn't have to worry about dying from poison. When the princess arrived, she suddenly spoke to Raveler, which surprised her. She didn't think they would ever talk again. The princess was very happy that Raveler had returned and was now completely fine, so she immediately hugged her and could not tear herself away. The maids tried to distract the princess somehow because she needed to eat and arrange gifts, but the princess said that she would eat only after she talked with Raveler a little more. It was actually quite annoying when the princess hugged her like that without warning. She had to be even more careful from now on. Raveler really wanted the princess to finally move away, and she did. Alina saw that Raveler was still testing poisons and was very upset about it. She asked again if she wanted to become another and always be there, because it was a safer job. But Raveler did not want and did not intend to stop being a lady in waiting. She decided to tell the princess that she actually enjoyed working as a taster and protecting her. After all, if at least this way she could atone for some of her sins, she would gladly do it. So she asked the princess to listen to her wish and understand. She used her sweetest look and her softest voice, and of course the princess accepted. Now the princess was so enchanted that she said to Raveler, "We must become friends." The maids were shocked and immediately began to dissuade the princess because this girl was from a family that wanted to start a rebellion. But the princess did not care because Raveler ate the poison instead of her and proved her loyalty. Raveler wanted it all. She did not want to become the princess's friend, and now she did not know what to do. The maid doubted whether to allow the princess to be friends with this girl and looked at Raveler. With all her appearance, she silently begged for help, but nothing happened. The maid said that they really could be friends, and most likely the emperor would approve of it. Raveler was very upset. How much longer would this world make her suffer? And at the same time, she had to pretend that she was very happy and so grateful to become the princess's friend. To the north, in the Forest of the Dead, lies the ancient castle of Kawaru. Although it looks abandoned, someone actually lives there. This is the boy. He spends most of his time there, and usually he was bored, but now he remembers Raveler. She told him such strange things about how he would be happy with it, that she would protect him. But in reality, he was waiting for her to come and save him. Raveler was suffering in the princess's palace. If before she was a taster, now she also became a friend. This plus several new responsibilities. Raveler began to dine with the princess, and this made her eat even more. And when she didn't eat, the princess became upset. Although Raveler was already sick of this marshmallow, Raniel's maid, who was supposed to watch Raveler during the tasting, noticed that she always left the defective one for last, so she told the princess about it, and now Raveler has to eat that marshmallow, and even more. Although it must be said that Raveler had no choice but to eat everything that the princess gave, but now she was treated more respectfully and even given tea. Raveler, on the other hand, was even happy with her new position, because now she only needs to eat what the princess gives her. But she is not yet used to being treated so carefully. Raveler noticed Todori leaves in the plate of mushrooms. She learned about them from an encyclopedia. It says that they are a medicinal plant that purifies the blood. However, Raveler read that if a child under 10 eats them, it can cause stomach pain. Raveler called the maid and clarified that these were Todoria leaves, and then said that it was better for the child not to eat this because the stomach would not be able to digest it. The maids were skeptical at first, but then Raveler proved that she had read about it in a botanical encyclopedia to become a good taster for the princess. The maids then decided to immediately bring the chef to check it out. When he came, he said that it was some kind of mistake, and there are no side effects in these leaves, so they are used to improve the taste. But information also came, and he confirmed that it is better for children not to eat these leaves. And if this girl had not noticed them, the princess's life would have been in danger. But they, of course, exaggerated a little. However, now the chef was angry with Raveler, took it out on his book, although he himself was to blame. Raveler even felt sorry for him, because he would most likely be fired because of this, even though he cooks delicious food. The princess was very happy and began to boast to everyone that Raveler was her friend. The maids, when they looked at this, Raveler realized that they would no longer protect the princess from her. And that was the problem. They changed their opinion of Raveler for the better. And now, no one would definitely help her. The princess was giving herself up. Sometime later, Raveler was finally able to escape. She came to the palace of the noble wing and felt like a chick fed by her mother. But thanks to the fact that her work ended early, she made it on time, and all thanks to the efforts of the maids. Raveler had come here for a reason. Today, she had to say goodbye to Duke Vichelaberry before continuing her work, becoming a stater. After much thought, Raveler decided to repay the Duke for his kindness, although she knew she shouldn't. Anyway, she wrote something important in that letter to ask for her debt. Suddenly, as she walked, she heard people talking about the Duke. They were shocked that he refused to follow the imperial decree. On the one hand, the Duke could be understood, because the battle had just ended. But even so, as an aristocrat of the empire, he must obey orders, and for the sake of the princess, it was necessary to stop immediately. Raveler was already tired of hearing about this princess, so she wanted to leave here and find the Duke as soon as possible. The second part said that the Duke had been preparing for a rebellion on the battlefield for 10 years. And if this is true, then the goal of the war in the old days was not a rebellion at all, which means that he has not yet decided to rebel. Raveler remembered that the Duke had once said that war had begun to tire him. So to amuse himself, he decided to fight for the throne. It was written as if he actually understood the rebellion for such a trivial reason, but no matter how you looked at it, he didn't seem like that kind of person at all. Raveler heard that during the last war, the Duke had been unsparing until the very end, and there must be some reason for the rebellion. For example, if the Emperor had struck first. By crushing the Duke of Vichelaberry, the last threat to the throne will disappear. And with the fall of Felicity's line, the imperial family will come to absolute power. If that's really the case, then it's not something that Ravenler can influence in any way. But maybe it's not so, nothing is known yet. But Raveler hoped that the Duke would win. And if the Duke's son decided to fight, then no one would be able to stop him. Now, as for the other main character, Rowan, despite being the son of a Duke, he is different. He is the same guy and yonder who killed his cruel father, who abused him for many years, and then devoted himself entirely to the princess. Even if Raveler had told about the imperial family's betrayal, and the situation had changed, it wouldn't have mattered if Rowan had still killed the Duke, as was the case in the original story. In any case, it was the only thing she could do. She left the letter on the carriage step, and in fact the Duke was already sitting inside, watching her from the window, but she didn't see. Raveler quietly apologized to the Duke and prayed for his success in the war, then knocked loudly on the window so that they would notice the letter, and then ran away. The Duke opened the door, took the letter, and began to read. Raveler expressed her gratitude for saving her back then, and inspired by such kindness, she decided to become stronger so as not to cause peace to anyone. And then in small print, she wrote to the Duke to be careful, merits, because her father said that the bearded man looked somehow suspicious. At the moment when Cassius needed support the most, a child from Felicity's family did it. The Duke, who everyone fears, and even the assistant was shocked when he saw Cassius smiling. The Duke asked his assistant to find a way to bring this child here because he wanted to meet her in person.